All right, welcome back. You can come on in, grab your seats. We'll get going with the next session. One of the critical things that the Homeland Security Advisory Council is doing is looking at the customer service experience and how to improve that. Here to discuss that report and how DHS will implement better customer relations experiences going forward. To moderate the panel is Homeland Security Experts Group member Jean Meserve. Jean, thank you for being here and look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you all for returning from lunch to listen to our brilliance. We appreciate it. So we all travel, and my bet is that all of us at some point have had a not so great experience with either screening or immigration. So the department has said it's committed to improving the customer experience. It's interested in using technology to do that. So that is what we're going to discuss today, how those efforts are moving forward. Let me introduce my panel. At the end is Nathan Lopp. He is Vice President of Corporate Real Estate at United Airlines. Sitting next to him is Krista Powers, who's the Vice President of Client Engagement at IDEMIA. She also happens to have worked previously at both the TSA and United Airlines, so she has a great perspective. And next to me is John Pistol, who you all remember was administrator of the TSA. Prior to that, he was Deputy Director of the FBI, and now he is President of Anderson University. Thank you all for being here today. Let me start with you, Krista, and ask IDEMIA. For those who don't know your company, what does it do?
Sure. Well, if you flew here today, then you used our technology. IDEMIA is an identity security and biometric technology company. At the airports, you're most familiar with our CAT machine. It's the machine that TSA uses to verify your ID. We print the majority of driver's licenses here in the US and digital IDs. We also do pre-check enrollment and facial recognition and fingerprint reading software used by law enforcement and government agencies.
So we've all used it before.
Yes.
Nathan, what are the projections on what's going to happen to air traffic in the next couple of years, passenger traffic on airlines?
Yeah, passenger traffic, we see it definitely in the double-digit growth cycle. You see United in particular and others ordering new planes. They're bigger and better from what they're replacing. So you're going to see that passenger growth be significantly bigger than what you have today, we feel.
Double digit, can you be more specific than that?
It changes based off how Boeing's delivering, how Airbus is delivering, how the air traffic control system can handle things. So I'd say, more than 10%. I won't be more specific.
John, can the current screening system handle that kind of an increase?
No.
Okay, we can leave. No.
Okay, well. Well, yeah. So there obviously can. This question at what cost? So how long does it take to get to a checkpoint, through a checkpoint, to be boarded, to be offloaded? All those different things that are inherent in the travel system. So yes, but with a lot of caveats. So there needs to be innovation, which I think we'll get to.
Yes, right now, as a matter of fact.
Well, there you go. Let's talk about innovation.
So you're the guy who started pre-check.
I oversaw. Yeah, we had a great team. Yes.
Well,
I'm just curious. Show hands if you are in TSA pre-check.
Yeah, in this
Beautiful.
Audience.
Okay, I would hope so. Yeah.
So is it performing as you expected or hoped it would?
And so anything I say right now, I'll defer to Administrator Pekoski, who will be here a little bit later. But yes, from a former administrator's perspective and with my FBI background and all of that, and now as a private citizen traveling, I would say yes, there have been some delays because of new technology that has been in place in certain airports at TSA pre-check lanes. And it's better security screening, but it is causing some delays at some airports. So I think that'd be something to explore with Administrator Pekoski.
Nathan, did you want to weigh in?
No, I would agree. I think, pre-check's like traveling in the good old days, right? But the problem is it's gotten two things. One, it's gotten so popular, you're actually starting to see, backups and the lack of kind of the lanes that actually go with that growth. O'Hare in particular, I think, has roughly the same lanes that it has 5 years ago, even though the population's gone exponential. So, it needs to be able to evolve and scale with that. And also, where we can, we should strive for consistency and new technologies across the board versus You have one airport being good and one airport kind of stuck somewhere.
Before we get to the technology fix, I'm wondering if there isn't an easier fix, like designate more lanes for pre-check. Isn't that relatively easy?
Well, it is and it isn't, right? Because you've got limited real estate in any airport, but then the other problem is you still have people who don't have it. So you can't have, it's this balance of, yes, you could do all the great things for pre-check and encourage people to do it, but you really don't want a 60-minute line wait for those that don't have it either. So it is a balance.
And the mix of travelers changes, right? During COVID, it was different, right? Business travel is different now. And so you have to constantly be evaluating that mix of passengers, how, the Monday morning rush of travelers traveling for work isn't the same now at every airport as it used to be. Maybe more people travel on Tuesday. So all of those factors have to play into, and you have, a workforce that has shift bids, right? And so if there's bad weather and other things change, all of that, the staffing model has to be able to adapt to that.
And I would just add to that, the combined sessions, breakout sessions yesterday, future travel and then cyber and then the security aspects of all that, there was some great discussion about the flipping the script of going from, as Nathan was saying, there's certain lanes that are designated for pre-check. In the future, if more and more people are enrolled in pre-check, then more and more lanes can be dedicated to that. Fewer lanes for the standard screening or for the enhance on the selectees and things like that. And so that may be part of the future, that you have majority actually of people going through pre-check lanes, which gives efficiency to TSA and even budgetary implications there, good budgetary implications. And it just makes for a better travel experience for travelers.
Are there potential downsides to increasing the size of the pre-check population? Not only do those checkpoints potentially become more congested, but that sense of being in an exclusive club kind of diminishes, doesn't it?
So what I would say is it all comes down to security. Because of the vetting that's done for the pre-check passengers ahead of time, TSA knows more about those people, so can better assess the risk that they may pose. And so it's better security because it's not just at the physical checkpoint, it's obviously all the things that are done. And for those who are not in pre-check, obviously the normal vetting is done, but it's much more limited. So it's, I would say, better security because it's risk-based, intelligence-driven.
I'd agree, and I also, at the end of the day, speed is nice, but it's a security function. And so any technology that can speed things up is great as long as it's also maintaining and ideally enhancing the security. And so I think more people in pre-check is great. And as you've seen, right, TSA has matured the other technology, the algorithms to reduce the false positive rate on check and carry-on bags so that can also be faster in the standard lane. So there's a lot of different components to enhancing the security while also increasing the speed.
Nathan, what do you hear from your customers? What do they want?
Look, we measure things by NPS, Net Promoter Score, and one of our measurements. But when you use pre-check and when you have pre-check, it's a 3 to 5 point upswing, and so customers definitely love it. I would push back saying that it's an exclusive club. It's not really there anymore. I think it was when it first came out, and I applaud you very much for starting it. But it's now gone to where this is kind of more your norm for your business travelers, and it should be. It's not a lounge status, which, by the way, you can come into ours as many times as you want if you have membership, unlike others. But that's not how.
Are you still out there?
That's not how this is really set to be.
Let's talk a little bit, if we could, about technology and how it could be changing the pre-check experience. Krista, is anything going to be different?
A lot's already different and is going to continue to evolve, and it all hinges on biometrics, right? Whether it's you've enrolled your face when you enrolled in pre-check or global entry because you used your passport and the government has a copy of your photo, or digital driver's licenses, which are here in many states today, more are coming. The new credential authentication technology machine will allow you to use your face, self-service. If you're a registered pre-check traveler, you can walk up to the machine, it'll match your face against the gallery, and you can move forward. If you have a digital ID, similarly, you can hold up your phone, the machine will interact with your phone, it'll pull your ID information, it'll validate your ID that you're traveling that day, and it'll validate that you actually are the person who is traveling that day. Live.
So will there be any interaction with people at the TSA check?
Officers will be there, of course, to oversee, but it will be an automated process that will have an officer interaction when required.
So you mentioned global entry. What's the interface? Global entry is owned by CBP as opposed to TSA.
Right, and preceded TSA PreCheck.
Right. So what's the interplay between the two, and could it be smoother? Could it be better?
Well, so global entry, if you sign up for global entry course, you get TSA PreCheck included, not vice versa, because global entry is if you have a passport. And the last figures I saw, 110, 115 million Americans have passports. So 200 million plus don't have passports, so they don't need global entry unless there's some exception, but generally not. So from that perspective, there are two different systems. For those who might travel internationally, then signing up for global entry is the way to go, because then you get TSA PreCheck included. And as somebody has mentioned several times, it's one of the last bargains the U.S. government is offering its taxpayers to do something at a reasonable cost for a defined benefit.
Do you have to wait to be approved for global entry to get the pre-check? And is there a way to change that? You're nodding down there.
No, I think that would be great. I don't know the answer, but I know I have friends who are waiting for global entry who can't get their pre-check because they're waiting for the 6-month or 8-month interview process for global entry.
And the HSAC report touched on that, right? Because it's a different program with very different standards. So the global entry program requires a law enforcement interview. And so the report looked at, is there a way to enable the kind of first part of the enrollment to occur, give the person their pre-check, because pre-check doesn't require a law enforcement interview, and then if and when the interview is available, then you could kind of complete that next step.
Are there any pilot projects going on right now that would make it easier to sign up for pre-check?
Yes. Nathan, you want to talk about it, or should I?
No, go ahead and I'll fill in on that.
Part of, like anything, you want to meet customers where they are. And so even though pre-check appointments are readily available and you can easily get one, we have this exciting pilot we just launched with United in Denver, where we're doing enrollment actually in the terminal post-security when people are not rushing, when they have time to kill on a connection or they're traveling otherwise.
And I think that's what the value is, finding the people, when they're in the airport, where we can do it quick, they're in the mindset of this is a benefit. How do we capture them in that forum? And I think, the Denver pilot is one, but there's much more that we can also do with our app and other interfaces of how we interact with the customers.
And when are those changes coming that would make it easier?
We're constantly evaluating, and I think the Denver pilot is great and something that, we can look to expand on others, but it's really about driving people to that. Because, one of the other things is when people have a good experience when traveling, then they want to travel more. When you have a horrible experience, you're not really looking forward to that next trip.
There have been hints from administration officials that maybe they're looking at a wholesale overhaul of this trusted traveler universe. Good idea, bad idea?
It depends on the specifics, of course. So good idea if it means some synergy between programs, and not just pre-check and global entry, but are there other government programs that give you access to government facilities, for example, things like that. So that could be one of the avenues of saying yes, no, if it is more cumbersome or more costly or any of those negative things that would be associated with not an enhanced improvement.
So tell me what it's going to be like in 2 years if I go to the airport. What's screening going to look like? How's it going to be different?
You want me to start? I would probably say that biometrics are going to be a much larger piece of you walking up to that. And, I think that's kind of where it'll be. At the end of the day, you want to remove those things that are taking time, impediments. So I think, your face will be your key sort of thing.
And is the technology reliable enough?
Absolutely. And it's tested, right? That's part of the beauty of the way our system works is we have NIST, we have UL Labs to third-party validate and test and constantly look at these algorithms. It's not a one-and-done process. IDEMIA's algorithms are tested continuously by NIST and UL and at DHS S&T to ensure that we're meeting the highest standards, that we're continuously improving, right? Part of they touched on this in an earlier panel about talking about China and other countries where they use this technology in ways that we would not want to. but they're able to improve faster, right? Because they're constantly scraping the internet and doing surveillance, right? And so having the ability to have NIST and other safe ways to test and evaluate the maturation of this technology is critical, not just to hold all of us accountable as partners, but also to give trust and confidence to the traveling public that these technologies that the government is using in this ecosystem are safe.
And I would just add to that, in let's say 2 to clearly 5 years, I think we'll see many more TSA pre-check lanes as opposed to the standard lanes, because as Nathan said, that, I mean, the real estate is limited. You can't expand in most airports, and some are very constrained even as it is. But to flip those to more TSA pre-check lanes, fewer standard lanes, so again, hopefully expediting, fewer people in a queue, which could be unfortunately a target for a suicide bomber. Somebody wants to come up and just try to get in a queue, or baggage claim, things like that, as we've seen overseas. So I think we'll see more of that with more seamless, hopefully less frictionless engagement, and perhaps no engagement with a live person unless there's some issue to resolve.
And I think, I just want to pull on that too, I think you'll also, like, passports will become digital. I think you will be able to truly travel internationally using your phone in the future, and that's not that far off. Whereas, today it's maybe you have, a Maryland driver's license, for example, or digital. You could travel domestically in the US without your license, but you maybe need it in other scenarios. If you're like me and you don't always have your wallet on you, I have to think proactively, does the store have Apple Pay? Because I don't have a card on me. But I think 2 years from now, that won't be the case, and everywhere you will be able to transact with a digital ID if you choose to.
John, does that make you comfortable?
Yes and no, because it's the security, again, is the bottom line, and just as physical security is one of the aspects, the data security is the other. And based on everything we know about cybersecurity risks and benefits, it's only as good as the security is afforded. And so IDEMIA and all the airlines do a great job, as does TSA and CBP. The question is there a risk? And there isn't anything we do. And part of that is both the external risk from state actors that are, of course, out there, but then an insider with an axe to grind for whatever reason. And so what are the vulnerabilities associated with that? And as long as people go in with eyes wide open and recognizing, just as the IG and others do the testing at checkpoints to say, yes, is TSA, are they identifying, are they recognizing that, yes, this person is trying to smuggle X in? As long as that's done and they can learn from that. I know I spent some of the closed hearings on the Hill trying to explain why TSA officers did not find prohibited items that the IG or others were trying to sneak in, and why was that? And what were we doing? What were the lessons learned from that we could improve?
Which leads me to the next topic I want to talk about, which is not the screening of people, but the screening of baggage. Nathan, is it going to change? How is it changing?
Well, I think it's already changed, and I think there's some test pilots out there that have really shown success. So obviously with pre-check, not taking your laptop out and all that is a game changer in that. But you're seeing the 3D imaging of the new machines be much, much better in that. In fact, in Houston, we've had a pilot to where, I wouldn't call it a pilot because it's actually worked, and it is what Houston is going to be now, is you utilize backroom screening to where you speed it up. We're actually seeing processing of in the mid 200s an hour of people, which are beyond what was actually advertised for that. That's, usually you see things come 80% of what was advertised. This is showing 10, 15% above what was advertised. So the technology is there. It's also about how you roll it out in a consistent fashion. With that TSA, you've got local people that you need to work with to make sure they're comfortable too. But I think the technology is there to speed this up tremendously in the baggage, to where you don't have to take anything out at all.
And I think too, well, one, it's also for the customer, right? If they're not used to that machine and the protocol, making sure that the kind of passenger education element is there. But I think also, and the TSA administrator talks about this a lot, the capability of this technology to be enabled remote screening, meaning the officers don't have to be physically at that airport. They could be at another location. That's a game changer, right? In terms of resource allocation, in terms of being able to flexibly adapt to demand and staffing needs, and this newer technology is what enables that, right? The technology we had 10 years ago, that wouldn't have been possible.
And the other part of that, Gene, I think is the education for the traveling public. So for example, TSA is on track this year to set another record in terms of handguns seized at checkpoints in carry-on bags. And the idea, so when I was administrator my last year, we went over 2,000 guns seized, and that was, there's a national crisis. What are we going to do? Because over 80% of them were loaded. And so now they're on track. I think it's going to be 6,500 guns. And so what are people thinking? And the number one excuse I'll say, because it's almost always men, sorry, ladies, not, and it's, my girlfriend or my wife packed my bag for it. Well, okay, if you're going to be carrying, then man up and, okay, yeah, I packed my bag or I didn't pack my bag, but that's my gun. So yeah, I forgot about it. So there you go. So, but that education part is as more and more people travel to make sure they understand. No, you don't bring a gun to the checkpoint. Now, you can check your bag if you declare it to the airline. You follow those protocols, but that's not the point. You're not taking a gun on the airline.
Well, how is it that message hasn't gotten across?
What?
Who dropped the ball here?
No, I think it's out. I'm just people, those with eyes to see and ears to hear, let them see and hear. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Nathan, you mentioned the physical infrastructure at some of the airports. How limiting is that? And is it going to be going forward as some of these new technologies are?
So hopefully the technology, so it is going to be limited, but you hope that the technology solves that, because the faster the throughput, then the less real estate you need. One example, Denver Airport. Wow, what an I'm watching my words. The security there has some enhancements needed to be coming, and it is. And so they're adding, I think, up to 14 new lanes. And they need that for their passenger growth. But they had to do a $2 billion renovation to do it. That's unsustainable. And so you've got to think about how the technology can make it faster and quicker so that you don't need to invest in this real estate.
I'm curious, when there are those kinds of renovations taking place, is there enough conversation between the airport authority and the airlines and the TSA and other law enforcement agencies? No. Okay.
No, absolutely not.
And
there's a design in a major airport we have right now that, not one of those, but CBP, to where they put the baggage, completely opposite of where it needs to be for leaving. And so, that got to a 30% design. There's not that conversation that needs to be had.
Who should be convening that conversation?
Well, I think it's up to the airport leadership and then also the government agencies to force these conversations to have it. But also the airlines need to make sure that they're being part of that conversation as well.
And I think with coming policy changes, that's going to become even more important, right? Congress has enabled one-stop security, which allows TSA to designate a certain number of foreign airports to be commensurate with U.S. standards, and those passengers will be allowed to connect onto domestic flights in the U.S. without being rescreened, right? Great, that's amazing. How do you keep them separate, right? In the airport environment today, very challenging. And it's only, it's limited pilot today, but in the future, hopefully it would be a full-scale policy change. But that's a massive infrastructure undertaking to actually operationalize.
And one of the things I learned when I became the administrator, the expression, which I'd not heard before, but if you've seen one airport, you've seen one airport.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the idea that there's any standardization, it is completely based on what the local needs are, and as the growth developed, how can we expand, and what's our real estate footprint here? So yeah, challenges.
Technology costs money.
It does.
How limiting is that, John, to deploying some of these new systems at airports?
Yeah, so everybody knows about the passenger fee that goes on each ticket and what that's supposed to be going for in terms of enhancing TSA's budget for the airline passenger fee. And of course, that has some of that's been diverted back to the general budget deficit reduction several years ago, and so that's still being worked out. So obviously the federal government, our tax dollars, pay for some. The airport authority pays for some. The airlines have great programs for actually contributing technology, some equipment to TSA, and I think CBP, I don't know about that. So there's multiple ways, but somebody's paying for it, and the question is, what's the ROI for that? So what do I get for that $2 billion, whatever? And what are the consequences of that if it doesn't go well? Is somebody voted out of office or kicked out of office or whatever it may be?
Or TSOs get yelled at is
Or
more
TSO,
likely.
yeah, security officers, right.
And I think too, the administrator has done a fantastic job of putting out a capital investment plan for TSA. If you haven't read it, it's 102 pages, but I promise you it's worth a read. And he did that for a reason. He wanted to create a roadmap for the technology providers as well, to say this is what I'd like to do in an ideal world to incentivize that R&D. But the other part of it is funding, right? And how do we kind of get out of this budget cycle we're perpetually in with short-term funding and the lack of ability to long-term plan for these very expensive long-term investments?
Is it a good investment for the airlines to pay for this?
Yes, but there's a balance. The airlines have to invest in many other things as well, and so it is, I think, more appropriate for the tax dollars that are supposed to be going to that to be used for it.
Were you going to?
Well, I was just going to say, I applaud Administrator Pekoski in terms of the Innovation Task Force, and we heard from Austin Gould yesterday in one of the breakouts who oversees that with some other folks. And that idea that innovation, I think, comes up in 17 different aspects of the department writ large, in either task forces or innovation, different things. And the question is, well, several questions. One, is that innovation just within that agency? Is it just within TSA, siloed apart from CBP or siloed from somebody else? And then second, is it engaged with the private sector? So what innovation is the private sector doing, either the airlines or other technology companies? And how is that working together to make sure that the taxpayers are focused, that the agencies and everybody are focused on security, job number one, in the best way that promotes the free movement of people and goods with the best security. So that innovation is great, but if it's done in silos, not good. If it's done with the private sector, even better. And then the question that you asked, who pays for all that innovation? And I think those are some questions that every administration deals with.
Krista, from your perspective, what is that conversation like with government? Does government know enough about what you're doing and how it could be applied? And does industry know enough about what the government actually needs in terms of innovation?
I think it's, for IDEMIA, it's a robust conversation ongoing. We, are a partner of the government, so we're working with them every day. We have cutting edge technology that, we'd love to have the government use today, but it's not approved yet, right? For example, we have an app that can take a picture of your hand and it can lift your fingerprints from that photo. The capabilities of that type of technology for enrollment and other things, but, it's not currently approved by the FBI. Maybe former Administrator Pistol can assist us with that. But yes, I think, but going back to the government has a very long procurement process. This came up in our breakout session yesterday when CBP was talking about wanting to have more kind of nimble procurement processes available to them. There are constraints, budget constraints, the requirements development, all of these pieces that are, well-intentioned, but can significantly slow down the pace of innovation.
I do want to pursue that procurement question. Technology is moving fast. Procurement does not.
No.
John, is it crippling?
Well, I wouldn't say it's crippling, but it is cumbersome. It's not a streamlined, agile process. The budget cycle, if we having continuing resolutions and things, it causes chaos at times in terms of the procurement process. So what can vendors rely on in terms of the government procurement process? And yeah, as Krista mentioned, if there's technology that needs to be approved, what's that part? And then how long does it take for the government to procure and apply, put in place that technology? So it needs to be improved.
Nathan, is there enough harmonization between airlines or among airlines and between the airlines and the government in terms of data, digital identity, all of the things that technology can draw upon?
Yeah, I think, look, I think we have a good relationship with the government. I wouldn't necessarily speak for other airlines, but I think it's roughly there to where we have that. Could it be better? Absolutely. But, overall, I think that the airlines are good about working with the government partners on what can be there to help the customer experience overall. And we feel we have a good relationship with, TSA and other partners in that.
John, from the government perspective, good relationship?
Well, during
Good enough?
my 4.5 years as administrator, yeah, it was an excellent relationship because we're all focused on the same goal, protecting people in the most efficient way possible and providing for the best customer service, because a happy customer is good for everybody, a happy passenger. I remember the first time that we did a pilot of TSA pre-check. It was at JFK, and I was on the other side of the checkpoint as somebody who came through for the first time, and they went through. They didn't have to take their shoes off, didn't have to take the lap. And this passenger, she walked through, and she's kind of looking around, like waiting for somebody to jump on her or something. and she went through, and no alarms went off, and the TSO said, "That's it, ma'am. Go ahead and get your bag." Really? She almost started crying. I mean, it was such a positive. And then the TSOs all around her, it's like, okay, we like this, because it gave, instead of passengers berating the TSOs for patting them down, or their 95-year-old great-grandma, whatever, or the 2-year-old baby, they were treating them with respect because that risk assessment had been done. And so that was such a positive experience. Yeah.
I'll just add to that. My mother's 77, and she traveled recently, and they told her she needed to take her shoes off because if you're under 75, you do. And she's like, actually, I don't. So she was thrilled to be thought to be under 75. So you can also really make someone's day depending on how you apply the policy.
Yeah, it's like when I get carded. I'm like, yeah. Thank you
we
so
won't
much.
ask the last time you were carded, Gene. So that's.
Actually, within weeks, but anyway. So there was a little bit of conversation about how technology can help you with staffing issues at TSA, that it can help you deal with surges and so forth. Is the workforce ready for these changes in other respects? Do they have the skills? Do they have the knowledge? Are you going to have to do some retraining?
Yeah, again, I'll defer to Administrator Pekoski, but during my time, I would say yes, because we would pilot things, as Nathan mentioned, in terms of how does this work and what does it actually mean for the workforce? And if it's a better experience for them because of the other screening going on before they ever get to the checkpoint, absolutely. And the training that takes place now is not just done in a hotel conference room a couple of weeks before somebody starts, but the TSA Academy and things where they're getting standardized training so they know how to react and how to be proactive in terms of addressing the security issues while facilitating the movement of people and goods.
And the administrators, focus on getting the pay to be more commensurate with other government agencies. Obviously, is a huge benefit to ensuring you're attracting the right workforce and able to retain them, right? Because attrition is a problem, right? The agency would get great people, and then they would go on to other roles in the government because they'd already be, kind of in the system. And so that having a higher pay scale allows those folks to want to stay at TSA and to, stay and train and learn, and that helps the whole system.
And I think TSA was creative this past 18 months of when there were significant staffing shortages at places, looking to incentivize in the right way to get people in the right places. Right. I got to give TSA credit for that because that was creative in doing so.
We have some time for audience questions. Does anybody have any? I do see a hand right here.
Especially the planted questions.
Oh, there we go.
Thank you so much for a wonderful conversation. Would love to branch out a little beyond the checkpoint, talking about the customer experience more broadly across the aviation experience. Really enjoyed recently, traveled on United and had the option where it actually in the app gave me wayfinding directions to get to where bag drop was. Can you talk about what you're seeing in terms of some of those wider technologies and how they'll provide a better way for people to know when do I need to be someplace, how do I get to where I go, all those things that frankly just make it less stressful.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is to me. We recently won our app in Portugal, won a kind of a worldwide contest on it. So I've got to give our designers on that a pretty big credit. And I think they are always being more creative on it. The wayfinding is, just one thing, but also you see how the live piece, if you have an Apple phone, of how that live piece, that's I think in the future you're going to see, you haven't checked in for your flight. Warning, are you, this is when you need to, it'll interface with, call it a map technology. This is when you need to leave for the airport, making it just so you have less to think about to get there and make it kind of that, frictionless type experience. But I think we've had great improvements, and I think we've just scratched the surface of where that's going.
Can you marry it up with TSA information to give people, for instance, a sense of how long the line's going to be at the checkpoint?
We've got technology now. We haven't yet, but we have technology now that does give us kind of a more accurate picture of those line waits. What we need to do, though, is make it predictive, because we can tell you if you're 45 minutes, an hour away from the airport, what it is now. Well, that doesn't necessarily help you if by the time you're there, that line has increased. So how do we move to a predictive technology? How, could you use AI for that? Those are things that I think you're going to see over the next few years. And Chris's point, none of this is far away. I think you'll just continually to see it. You'll see it more evolution, so that 3-4 years from now, we've got a much bigger piece of the pie. But it just continually came out.
Any other questions out there? Rob has one.
So fully appreciate the TSA fan club and count me as a member as well. But customer experience across DHS goes beyond that one agency. Obviously, it's the biggest and the one that most Americans interact with. Krista, is there anything else from the report, from the recommendation list in the HSAC report, that you think is worth highlighting? And John, as a customer of DHS, as a university president, what do you expect to pull from this experience, and how will that change your interaction with this agency?
Sure. I think, part of what it looked at is how can technology kind of enhance the experience of the customer, right? And so whether it's a FEMA disaster victim being able to file a claim, a digital driver's license makes that possible more easily with validated, authenticated information of knowing who that person is. And the likelihood is they probably may not have their driver's license, but they'll probably have their phone. USCIS is doing a lot of innovative stuff with virtual interviews, and they actually use IDEMIA's technology as well for their fingerprint capture. But I think there's a kind of holistic, and you're seeing amazing collaboration between CBP and TSA, right? On how do they kind of marry up their databases so that it's a seamless experience for the customer. And I think that to the extent that that can be, transcended across, like with digital IDs, which will enable that, to FEMA and to the other components, and not just DHS, right, across the government, right? And that's part of, I think, what Real ID is hoping to get towards once it's fully implemented. With TSA is now setting those standards for what digital ID for Real ID needs to look like, but all of that can enable this connectivity with the citizen in control, right? And that's, I think, the benefit of a digital ID is that you are always in control of how and when that is used. Unlike your physical license, which may get lost or, misused by another person who may share your appearance.
And I would just say one of the things we haven't talked about, and it's not a whole different discussion, but it's what the department is doing with privacy and civil liberties across the board, particularly U.S. citizens, and then for those who travel to the U.S. And so how does TSA, CBP, others deal with those privacy and civil liberty issues that the American people should expect them to uphold? I know we tried on the, when I was still at TSA, in terms of the wait times of using people's IDs as they were coming in and going through the checkpoint. And so it would be real time, but there was quite a bit of pushback from privacy groups to say, no, I don't want you using it was all anonymized. It wasn't their ID. It was just the fact that they were a person who had checked in and was standing in line. And then here's when they started in line, and here's when they went through the line. So that was 8 minutes, let's say. But there's still those issues that the department, and I know Secretary Mayorkas and others are all focused on that, making sure respecting the privacy and civil liberties of Americans.
Anybody else out there have a question? I see. Yes, right here.
I have two questions. First of all, thank you for amazing, panel. First question is, what are your thoughts in terms of using technologies, for example, educational technologies, while people staying in, for example, in a lane, TSA lanes, use an educational component of explain people and reduce their fear of, for example, digitization. That's one thing. And second part of the question, possible reduction of possible usage of QR codes, because QR codes actually will lead you to educational website where people can learn and get their fear reduced, get more comfortable with digitization.
I would just start off with that. Many, if not most, of the 430 airports that with the passenger lines for for the TSA checkpoints have video monitors with some type of educational material. Now, it's not necessarily forward-looking. It's more so what you need to do in the next several minutes to make sure you get through security safely, securely, and on a timely basis, as opposed to next week or next year, this is what you can expect. But then the QR codes, they use some, but I think that's rather ad hoc, if you will.
Other thoughts?
Yeah, I know as we've been designing the new version of the CAT, we've played around with putting a sticker in a different place to make it clearer where you actually hold your phone up, and trying to constantly watch the user experience to see any kind of tweaks we can make to make it more obvious and user friendly, so that it doesn't require too. The goal is for it to make things easier and faster. So we're constantly looking at things we can adjust to make sure the customers know what to do without having to have too much instruction.
So before we wrap up, I would like each one of you to give me your dream vision of what you think technology could do for the customer experience in interactions with DHS. John, do you want to go first?
Well, yeah, secure, seamless travel.
What does it look like?
It's secure.
And you just walk through, for instance, at an airport?
Well, yeah, you're not interacting with a person unless you have to, because there's some anomaly, there's some alarm, something. But yes, you're going through and you're doing it quickly and efficiently, securely.
I'll add to that, using your digital ID, transacting with IDEMIA's wonderful credential authentication technology. But I'll also add that maybe in the future, pre-check the liquid restrictions could be higher. As someone who has products, I would appreciate being able to travel with more than 3 ounces.
I totally agree. Nathan, last word to you.
Yeah, definitely fast, secure, frictionless. You walk in, somewhere your face is already recognized. You are kind of going down a tunnel that you're just walking through without having to really interact, unless you are having problems or taking one of the guns through or something like that. But it is that total recall type style security.
Nathan Lopp, Krista Powers, and John Pistol. Thank you all.
Gene
Appreciate
Meserve,
it.
thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you.